It was the grace of God that protected Charleston from Hurricane Florence. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I sit down one-on-one with Jared Smith of Charleston Weather to talk about Florence. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores and listen to this interview later on iHeartRadio. Jared Smith.
Yeah.
It's so good to see you, guy.
It's our nice yearly visit at this point, it feels like.
Exactly right. And we picked the perfect time.
Yep.
Because as we are going on camera right here, we have 260 at least warnings from Wilmington on down to Georgetown.
Yeah, 260 miles of flash flood warnings from anywhere from Southern Virginia all the way into Georgetown, Horry County. Very bad. I mean, it's I think that just illustrates the breadth of the problems that Florence caused. The fact that people in North Carolina, they're not done with Florence yet. It's still raining in spots. It's still raining in parts of Wilmington. It's still raining in the Piedmont of North Carolina.
Right.
It's still raining in the Triad. It's still raining in Southern Virginia. A friend of mine this morning had a tornado warning right over his house. He had a tornadic circulation right over his house. He works at the Southeast Regional Climate Center, and he's like, "Yeah, I woke up to a tornadic circulation right over my house. It didn't touch down, thank goodness."
Right.
But they're still dealing with Florence today. They'll be dealing with Florence tomorrow, and for weeks, months, and maybe in some cases years to come. The breadth of what's happened there is just absolutely catastrophic.
Mm. And what's that headline would you write about Florence right now?
I mean, God, I think there's multiple facets to it, but it's just it's just a gigantic. Water is always the big killer in hurricanes. The winds get all the attention.
Right.
I think we talked about this last year too.
Right.
The winds get all the attention. The winds are the sexy thing. Category 4, Category 5. That's a wind scale.
Right.
It has nothing to do with the amount of water that moves in. As we know, Florence made landfall as a Cat 1. So I would say the headline would be something like, scare quotes, just a Cat 1, or something like that. And somewhat sarcastically because, by wind speed, it was at 75, 80 miles an hour at landfall. But that doesn't matter when it's pumping gobs and gobs of tropical moisture over the same areas for 48 to 72 hours and is able to, is providing the lift to get that moisture to condense and just drop over the same areas for 48 to 72 hours. There were days where I thought the weather model sites I was using was broken because I thought it was showing me like old data, but no, in fact it was updating. It would just look the same.
Wow.
It still had a band of very torrential rain pivoting over Wilmington, occasionally wobbling, but
right.
Wilmington area being and then pivoting into central North Carolina.
Right.
In flash flood emergencies last night in Mecklenburg County.
Right.
They had, I think it's so hard to it's so hard to put a single category on it because yes, Category 4 storm sounds scary. But what did everybody do? It was a 2 or a 1. It's like, oh, this isn't going to be bad. As it turned out for Charleston, boy, did we get lucky.
Yeah, we did. Thank God.
Supremely lucky. Profoundly lucky.
Right.
We've been on the receiving end of this before, 2015.
Right.
The 2015 flood event with Joaquin offshore, and we had a cyclone drawing moisture in from Joaquin. Still one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. 2016 Matthew, and that had its own surge issues. I would arguably say that Irma, from a water perspective, was worse than Matthew in some ways, because again we stayed on that side of on the northeast side of that storm for an extended period of time, and very much what they're going through in Wilmington right now: tornadoes, flash flooding, significant storm surge, not quite 8 to 12 feet that they had at Newburgh, but still, storm surge issues, training rainfall. So we really caught a break, man.
And Florence, as everyone knows, really, if I can articulate this right, was walking as fast as a normal person would.
Slower, in some cases, yes. Yeah, so what happened, so the first thing about Florence that I think that everybody needs to understand is that, it never behaved. Florence never behaved. the latitude that it started at, climatologically speaking, is a guaranteed miss for the United States until now. No storm has ever started at that latitude and hit the United States. So that's at the end of it. To all of the climatology that everybody was like, oh yeah, we just lean on climatology and all that, and it's going to be fine. Yeah, no, you had to throw all that out the window. And then, and the problem was is that you had a very, very, very strong ridge of high pressure to the north. And that aimed to steer it, and where that would usually you get a weakness in that ridge, and it would curve out, and everything would be fine. Joyce and Helene found a way out, and they're gone.
Right.
They're non-issues.
Right.
But Florence missed its ride. It didn't get its ride because that high pressure was so powerful and so strong.
Right.
Bermuda High steered well south of Bermuda. Bermuda had every reason to be very concerned about it. And then the 5-day cone shift, and that high pressure just drove it right in. And then there were questions on, okay, there's going to be a second area of high pressure. This high pressure is going to move out. It's going to accelerate to the northwest, and then the steering is going to collapse. Where will the steering collapse? So there was a good feeling about 2-3 days out. The steering was going to collapse somewhere over the Carolinas, and we saw something like this with Harvey in Texas.
Right.
And so alarm bells, big time. And you see with some of the model output, which until Harvey people would dismiss as frivolous, but now when you see 50 inches on a deterministic run of the numerical weather prediction model, it's like, okay, well, wait a second, maybe we need to take this seriously. And so yes, it stalled out. It meandered for 2 days, and allowed significant amounts of rainfall to pivot right over eastern North Carolina, right over into parts of Horry County, where they had they've been dealing with tornadoes. They had 2 tornadoes yesterday in Myrtle Beach.
Right.
So those hazards stay in place. But it was very reminiscent of what happened to us with Joaquin. I mean, even though Joaquin itself stayed well offshore, the system that funneled all that moisture in hung around for 2 or 3 days and didn't get a move on until later.
Wow.
And so there's this very concerning pattern now of tropical systems making landfall and stalling out because high pressures to the north tend to be more anomalously strong than they used to be. So it's a concerning thing, to say the least, because just Florence didn't have a ride. She needed to hitch a ride from some other thing, and now she's got a ride, thank goodness, and is getting the heck out of Dodge. But still significant effects. I mean, the breadth of the storm and the breadth of the wind field. I mean, as we know, I mean, we had some decent gusts here, but boy, did we get lucky.
Yeah. And you obviously talk about central North Carolina, you talk about obviously Horry and Georgetown counties. As we sit here right now, what are those rainfall totals in your mind?
Yeah, so the rainfall totals up that way. I've seen there were cooperative observers. So first 2 things to note is that there are now new preliminary rainfall records for tropical cyclones in North and South Carolina. North Carolina is somewhere around 28 to 30 inches. I'll have to grab that exact figure. That figure is going to change. By the time that this interview goes out to everybody, that figure is going to change because it is still raining.
Right.
It is still raining there. And somewhere in Horry County we measured 16 18 inches, something like that. And again, it is still raining in some spots, so we might not be done with that yet. But we have preliminarily waiting for the Weather Service to quality check those, and the state climatologist has got to do some things and to verify that number. But yes, preliminarily speaking, yes, we have new rainfall records for tropical cyclones in North and South Carolina.
Wow.
And so what those records end up being is going to, it's still up in the air, pending validation.
Right.
Yeah. But, I mean, it just tells you everything you need to know about this system.
Yeah. And you talk about, let me go back 5 days ago to right now. What is the biggest difference about Florence in your mind?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that 5-6 days ago we might have been, the coast was preparing for Category 4 strike.
Right.
And I'm not going to debate the merits of evacuation here. I don't think that this is necessarily the forum to do that. I don't sit in the EMD. I don't make those decisions, and thank God I don't make those decisions, because that is the hardest decision to make. You're asking a bunch of people to take financial risk. You're asking a bunch of people to take a lot of risks with themselves to go find somewhere else to go. And you're doing it in a mass way, and you have to do it very quickly, because if this thing turns, you suddenly have less time to get out. Big questions 5 days ago. Big questions 5-6 days ago. There seems like just when the computer guidance was getting any sort of consistency around the expected track, which I had always kind of thought, I'd always been internally I plot these things. I lean on the Hurricane Center big time.
Sure.
They got it within 2 miles 5 days out. Okay, so Hurricane Center, they know what they're doing. So I'm not going to, but I always, but I keep like internal ideas in mind. And my strike zone was Myrtle Beach to Wilmington, and that's where I was about 5 days ago. And it seemed to, and I was thinking, maybe that, there's a potential that maybe the models were undersampling the ridge a little bit, because you heard a lot about this, probably heard a lot about the Euro, the ECMWF model. A lot of people were freaked out about this, and a couple things about that is that 5 days ago we were looking at a scenario where the ECMWF model had a major hurricane coming in and stalling out, and that was mostly accurate. It did not have a small area of low pressure around Florida that helped to weaken the system, helped try and dry air into the system from the south about a day or so before landfall. So there are a lot of little details that again, like, global models are great, but when you get down to the nitty gritty of things, all weather is local, all weather is, a lot of small scale processes can make a big difference. And it's observation. So you got to watch these things. And so by observation, we saw, it was like, oh, there's a little upper level low off of Florida, and the flow from that is actually shearing it off a little bit. And so that helped to weaken it as it got closer. But yes, were we justified in preparing for a Category 4 strike? Absolutely. We would have been foolish not to.
And obviously, from what I see, there's nothing in the tropical system or out in the sea right now, as far as we're concerned. What's next in your mind?
So I think the only thing that we got to watch right now is a little area that's used to be Tropical Storm Isaac. It kind of sheared out, and it still has a chance to potentially regenerate as it moves through the Caribbean. There's still, we still got 2 months left. We still got 2.5 months left. We passed the peak of hurricane season. We still got 2.5 months left, and the Gulf is still on fire. I mean, the Gulf is still very warm. The Atlantic is still pretty warm. There's still good sea surface temperatures. And again, as we saw with Florence, it comes Cat 4 at a relatively high latitude. I mean, that's probably a sign that we've got pretty good sea surface temperatures still, even despite Florence's upwelling. Right. We still have, pretty decent sea surface temperatures out there. So, again, I think the thing that we've been, we in the weather community have been kind of stressing all year is that our greatest threat is likely going to be from a homegrown system. And now we're getting into that time of year where we get cold fronts starting to come through. Hey, it's fall, right? It's just about fall. We get a couple days before, astronomically speaking, we're in the fall season. And so with that comes cold fronts. And sometimes, early in the season, cold fronts stall out. And sometimes you can get tropical systems that spin up off of the remnants of old cold fronts. And so we call these homegrown systems because they form very close to home. They don't give you the notice that maybe a Florence did. I mean, we kind of, between like some of the, the computer modeling and everything else, we had up to 2 weeks lead time on Florence, in some ways. That at least the threat might have been an issue. With these homegrown systems, it's a little harder to tell. It can all depend on, again, the smaller details that are hard to resolve, 3, 4, 5 days out. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen. But it is something that we need to be vigilant over, because again, everything is bathwater still in the Gulf, everything is bathwater to an extent in the Atlantic, but it's just something that we got to watch out for. I mean, that's just the duty of living on the coast from June 1st to November 30th.
Wow. To be continued.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, Jared Smith with Charleston Weather, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Thanks, Quintin. Good to see you.
Likewise. Thank